I am going to kick us off. So welcome everybody to First Fridays for Startups. This is our monthly ecosystem development event powered by Google for Startups. Miriam here from Dogpatch. I run the First Fridays program alongside my colleague Jake, who you've seen probably on earlier calls. And I'm going to give you a quick intro to today's session before we kick off. So this is the final session of today's event, and it's our Inspire session. This month, we're lucky enough to host one of Ireland's top serial founders, who, might I add, has broken a First Fridays record by attracting over 500 registrations for today's talk. So it's Cork's very own Pat Phelan, you can see down below me. Before we jump in, a bit of housekeeping. The format of today's talk is kind of more akin to a fireside chat than a keynote. So Patrick Walsh, who you can see here, who is the founder of Dogpatch Labs, is going to interview our guest Pat for roughly 30 to 40 minutes, after which we'll have an audience Q&A. So again, if you have questions for Pat, you can drop them in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, or put them directly in the chat, and Jake will move them from the chat into the Q&A box. If you're posting on social media, please be sure to use our hashtag First Fridays, and to tag us at Dogpatch Labs. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Dogpatch founder Patrick Walsh, who will introduce Pat and kick off today's session.
All right, how are you, Pat? Welcome.
How are you?
Fridays. Okay, and welcome to everyone else who's out there to this part of First Friday. What a day we've had so far. We had the welcome module in the morning with huge attendance. We probably had Ireland's largest virtual mentoring ever with the numbers that we had today. An amazing virtual pitch masterclass on our education module, but this one is about the Inspire piece, talking to an entrepreneur who's been there and done that. And Pat, for your information, just looking through the registrations, a lot of the folks listening in today are kind of at the early stages, raising a pre-seed or maybe a seed round, or a couple of people on their way to Series A. So it's probably, for me, the only time I'll ever interview or do a fireside chat with a trained butcher about digital technology and the future of fraud and telcos. And so that's going to be pretty unique in itself. Pat, we first met each other at Wyra, I think about 7 years ago. You were starting Trustev, which you sold for 50 million euros or dollars. And I was starting something else, which failed horribly and miserably, but I guess I had to fail before I succeeded and started Dogpatch. But I've always been struck by your level of just ferocious focus and energy. I suppose probably that you just think differently and bigger than anyone I've met, probably, or at least most of the people I met. Master of momentum, master of hype as well, and creating excitement around, you know, two weekends ago, we had Finn Murphy from Frontline in our First Fridays talking about the hype train. And you literally rented a train, you know, and put VCs on it. I mean, you take it literally. We might talk about that in a second, but just your ability to deliver and create businesses. So Cubic Telecom, you know, which you started, has attracted, I think, about 100 million euros of investment, and to my mind, changed a lot in telco, right? Then you did it again with Trustev, and now you're doing it again with SISU. And so I want to get into kind of, how do you do that? How do you spot these things, your mindset? How do you build, scale, repeat? What are the lessons for some of the other folks that are here today? So welcome, Pat. I know how busy you are, and thanks for sort of giving your time today, you know?
Oh, we're delighted. You know, and the funny thing about, I was thinking back when we chatted the other day, the funny thing about Wyra is I was jealous of you. You know, that's it. You know, I remember the two of you, and I remember the relationship, and I remember thinking, that's a fantastic idea. You know, because at that stage, you're kind of thinking, how do I scale what I have? And you're looking at, you know, the key here is making journeys shorter. That's the key to everything. Yeah. I was looking at you guys and thinking, I know we can do it, but if I was to pick the other person in the room that could do it, it probably would have been you guys or Phil, if you remember Phil in Valencia.
Yeah.
And that would have been, they would have been the three that I was looking at thinking, yeah, these are the three, you know?
Yeah. No, it just goes to show you, you can never know. I was certainly looking at you going, you know, but I see as part of it, you're always looking at the other guy thinking, oh, they must have a better idea than me. But actually, truthfully, you know, there's a level of just having that belief within your own thing and not comparing yourself as, well, am I as good a startup as the one next to me, you know?
And you know, I've seen loads of people do it. And myself and Liam, who works with me here yesterday, we were talking about it because we looked at someone, we said, oh, are they doing that a bit better? Or could they be doing it wrong? And if we change, now will both of us be doing it wrong? So I try to avoid the industry I'm in.
Yeah.
And kind of focus on that completely. You know, we know where we're going with SISU, and I know where I've been with the rest, and we have a journey. And it's to hit the outputs. Now, you might not always get there. It might be, you know, a small detour, but it's to hit the output rather than allow yourself to go too broad or to look at competitors. I know who our competitors are because of Google. I don't know who they are because of their Instagram account.
Yeah, I sometimes get asked that question from entrepreneurs, which is how much percentage of our time should we spend looking at our competitors versus just focusing on executing our own thing? Like, if you had a percentage rule, like, what is it for you, roughly?
I think there's two things that people get completely wrong in startups. They spend too much time looking around them. That's number one. So I would be sub 5% without a doubt. And they don't spend enough time thinking about who they have to hire. Right now, we're going to open 20 SISUs over the next 24 months. And I'm probably spending over 60% of my time talking to people.
That you might be hiring. You as a CEO, that's what you're doing. 60% of your time.
Wow. That I might be able to attract. Because if I'm spending masses of time in operations or in anything else, finance, etc., that's other people's jobs. Plus, I'm not good at it.
Yeah. And tell me, Pat, how are you, like, just out of curiosity, you're like, okay, you've got to find people. How do you go find those people? Like, how do you ensure, like, when you get up in the morning, how do you say, I got to find these people? Where do you start? What do you do?
So I think people miss huge tricks with LinkedIn. I keep telling people I'm going to give a master class. I spend an awful lot of time working on LinkedIn. I spend an awful lot of time networking with people who are in alternative networks to me. Like we're looking for a CMO at the moment for SISU for the USA. And it's not even a CEO. It's kind of what we're really looking for is a high frequency trader.
High frequency trader.
Yeah, massively acquire and use data to help us make better decisions.
Okay.
So now I'm talking to people in mathematics and fintechs about who's worked really well on acquisition, even loan acquisition.
Yeah.
Because what I want doesn't exist. So I've got to try find someone who has the experience of that acquisition piece that we can actually mold to our way of thinking as well. So you're always trying to think, how do I find amazing people? And also, you know, more importantly, how can you get amazing people earlier?
And so what you're just, I mean, a large part of you yourself on LinkedIn, using keywords, using brands of companies that you want, directly reaching out to people for a conversation is just a big part of your job right now. Yeah.
Big part of my job. The team, see what people miss as well, Paddy, is the team is everything. You know, like I was on the phone last night for over an hour to Kieran Sexton, who was my first salesperson at Cubic, who was he's
in Trustev as well, right?
Second hire.
Yeah.
You know, who I've just done a large investment with into something new. But, you know, it's the same people all the time. You bring them along with you. You know, when I was looking for a CFO for SISU, the first person I approached was Stephen, who was our CFO in Trustev, who worked in Telefonica, and we got him because of Wira. So it's that big continuity of people who, you know, the key. I think the key to the journey is knowing the things you're very weak at.
Yeah. Okay.
And hiring the best for that.
What are you weak at? What do you think you're weak at?
I'm terrible at spreadsheets and finance. Unfortunately, you'd probably have guessed that. That would be not my skill. I shouldn't be left near a HR person. They'd be the two I'd be terrible.
I never could have guessed, Pat. I never could have guessed.
Even though we're just talking about recruitment.
Yeah.
HR, I wouldn't be you know, I wouldn't be the greatest, but finance, I'm not the greatest.
So when you reach out to some of your old colleagues and you say, hey, listen, I'm working on this new thing, right? You know, like, and it's Botox, you know, like, did they not turn around and tell you, hey, listen, Pat, like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, why don't you do some, like, you were a digital fraud guy. You were at the pinnacle of digital fraud globally. You probably knew that whole industry. Would it not have been easier for you just to do another digital fraud or payments company? Like, why didn't you do that? Like, how did you end up where you are? What are you seeing that the rest of us are not seeing in what you're doing?
The easiest thing in the world would be to take 500 grand a year from TransUnion, who acquired us, and stock options and do nothing.
Yeah.
But that's it. So you have easy and easier. I think at its core, I'm an early startup guy. And I think what happened with SISU and this change, you know, and I can see people, you know, I can see the tech bros scratching their head, what's your man doing with Botox, you know, and it's quite funny. So my best friend is a doctor. He's my partner here, him and his brother. And I was in New York at the time, and I was thinking about what's next. And I started watching beauty closely. And the reason I started watching beauty was I used to get off at Bryant Park to walk to the office in New York, and I'd see this queue every morning. And eventually, nosiness got the better of me. I went over, and it was Dry Bar, which is a place where you go to get your hair blow dried. Okay. Great for you, but terrible for me. Yeah. So over I went, and I found out that women on their way to work in New York were getting their hair blow dried for $65, and there was a queue.
And it was a blow dry for $65.
Yeah, so you wash your hair and you get a blow dry on the way to work. Right. And this kind of got me thinking more and more about beauty. And James and Brian had studied to become doctors in Prague. They had one clinic, and I was back and forwards all the time. And I started helping them with a bit of marketing and a bit of financial advice. I was thinking about next, and in the middle of all this, I came up with this idea for a toothbrush. I watched Dollar Shave Club. If anybody's never seen it, the Dollar Shave Club introduction video is the best piece of marketing that I have ever seen in my life. And probably will be till the day I die. So I had this idea about a toothbrush, and people have a huge problem with toothbrushes. They keep them for too long, average life 12 to 14 months, which is just a disgrace. And I thought, hey, you'll do Dollar Shave Club for toothbrush. You'll get a hand. We'll deliver you heads every quarter with tooth foam instead of brush, and mouthwash and flavors and blah, blah, blah. And I took it all down the road, really serious. Conor Murphy was now building Bridge. Conor was super excited by it. And I started talking to Liam Casey, who's obviously in everything I do. And Liam was developing it for me. And I just blipped. I just said, no, this isn't for me. I don't think it's big enough. And, you know, someone else came up with it later, and it's out there today. It's called Quip, Q-U-I-P, and I'm delighted it's out there. And I think they're doing really well. Raised tens of millions, I think 40 million. Wow. So it's like that idea where it takes massive research first and looking at verticals, and then sometimes it can be sitting right in front of you. And then it's trying to, you know, and it was about probably 12 to 18 months of convincing Brian and James. I think we can create, they had a different name. It was called Visage. You know, every 1980s hairdresser has somewhere called Visage. So we got New World, who worked with me on every project I've done so far. New World, our big design house. I'm a big believer in strong brands, and everything I've done has had strong brands and a strong message and a strong story. And they worked on it, and we came up with SISU and raised a few quid from friends and family. And we've just done a 5.5 there now with Greycroft, you know, and I was chatting with you the other night, you know, everybody clapping you on the back and celebrating, and, you know, it must have been so easy. And, you know, I was on the road 19 months.
Really? So hang on a second, because Greycroft, weren't they involved in Trustev as well?
They were, but
so
they have the same question as you. Hey, when you're building another fintech startup, give us a shout. You know, when you're building something to make people look better, don't call us.
So, because sometimes you hear these stories like, well, it's, you know, it's easy for you, Pat, to raise 5 million, but you already sold something for 50 million, right? You know, you can just walk back into the VC that, you know, you made a ton of money for, and you say, listen, I'm doing the next thing, give me, and sometimes that happens, but that didn't happen for you.
No, this was a much harder fundraise than Trustev. We were in with some of the biggest in the world in San Francisco. We were in with some of the biggest in the world in London. And I won't say we were laughed out of the buildings because that'd be unfair, but they were short meetings.
Wow, they were short meetings.
And you know, because if you think about it, venture is risk, and they have people above them who are risking their money, and they're expected, you know, to be safe with it. And it took a long time, and it took a long time of talking to Greycroft and Ian Sigalo and Cameron Ansari and all the team there who are amazing people, and the team at Bullpen, Eric and Anna, who are also fantastic, you know, and you have to take them on a kind of a journey, and you have to tell them, look, people have got this wrong. This is a multi-billion-dollar business. Here's the sales of what's involved. It's totally fragmented. There is no brand, you know, so how do we help them understand, you know? And I remember myself and Brian Cotter, who's my partner here as well, we flew to New York, I think on the 9th of March for one day, because we were thinking there's this illness in China, you know, that might make people sick. And we flew for one day, and we got into Greycroft's building. The guy had like a 10-gallon drum of a thing, and wash your hands. And Ian Sigalo said yes, and we flew back that night.
Wow. Just before COVID, basically, just
like 5 days before COVID took, we closed. Ian Sigalo rang me. I'm happy to do the deal. Let's go. I've never invested in a business that's been closed before. So
yeah, retail, of course, you know, right during COVID.
You know, like if you
$5 million quid.
Exactly. If you look at a perfect storm, you know, we give people injections to make them look better. It used to be people used to think about this as making them look younger. Now makes it's the best form of you is the constant request. Market has changed dramatically into, you know, late millennials. So you've got injectables, retail, COVID, we're closed. The round isn't happening till we open. You're trying to think, will we ever open? Because, you know, remember the first shutdown, everyone was terrified.
Yeah,
and
there's a lot of fear.
And like you're at home thinking, okay, I got to get something going here. So we built a big e-com business. Liam helped us with that. And that grew very quickly, you know. And the key thing is, like, I also emailed all the investors every week. Here's what we're seeing. We're preparing for this. And we reopened and it hit week one, and that was it.
Wow. But the piece I didn't know was that you were on the road for the better part of a year and a half pitching this thing to every VC that you could get in front of. Because sometimes I hear it, you know.
Anyone that would listen. I remember Paddy Cosgrave's partner in the Chris in that fund, and Patrick in that fund. You know, they were in San Francisco, and I was ringing them, you know, anyone you can get me into today. And you know, like the real interesting thing, we built a business that's super profitable and would last forever, but that's not what I want to build.
Yeah.
I have no interest in building, you know, 8 Irish clinics that are cash flow positive and make tons of money. It's not in my boat. I'd rather, you know, do something, keep myself occupied.
Yeah, well, I think that's what probably some people thought you were doing until they kind of heard the Warby Parker pitch or the Starbucks pitch. Is that how you kind of pitched it to the VC? Like, did you use that kind of analogy, or were VCs not asking questions like, you know, well, what's the lifetime value? How does this make sense? You know, like, how did you, I'm just curious, how did you position it in a way that actually got them over the line?
We're in an amazing business, because if you look at Warby, and I remember I moved to New York just as Warby opened, and I have reading glasses, and, you know, I couldn't wait to get into Warby, and I was expecting, and, you know I've met Neil a few times, and I love the brand, and this is nothing on the brand, but I was expecting something game changing. And in reality, they have nice opticians.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, they're just nice opticians.
It's a great brand. It's a cool space, and it's some nice, you know, thing. But
it's very funky, but it's nice opticians.
It's nice opticians, yeah.
Yeah, and what we understood was globally, our competition isn't a brand in New York or a brand, you know, someone who owns 3 clinics in LA. Our competition are the doctors who administer almost $10 billion a year of this.
Wow.
That it pays for a nice house in the Hamptons, or it pays for the Mercedes, or it sends the kids to private schools or whatever. And we know that they're really poor at marketing. We know we can acquire reasonably single-digit figures. And we also know that, like, this is where people completely miss this. We own a SaaS business. SISU is a SaaS business.
SISU is a SaaS business?
Yes.
All right, explain.
So
help us understand that.
If you come to us tomorrow for Botox, that Botox has a shelf life in you of 90 days.
90 days. I need to come back to you in 90 days.
So you need to come back to us 4 times a year.
Okay.
As you get older, and you're lucky you're very young at the moment, but this lovely thing down here will lose volume. Now you need fillers, and next you look tired and you'll get under eye. So what happens is, on the initial acquisition, where our conversion is very high 80s, retention,
$80 to acquire.
No, single-digit dollar to acquire.
Oh, single-digit dollar to acquire.
80-something% retention, or sorry, conversion, 70-odd% retention. So what you've got to do is get the flywheel going at the outset, turn marketing on massively. And what you've got is you've got a SaaS business slightly aligned to an aircraft yield model.
Got it.
And that's what we built. And we built this high frequency model. And when the venture partners saw that, they said, yeah, this is...
Okay. So you were able to, because the way the VCs are always thinking is cost per acquisition, lifetime value. And you were able to kind of say, well, actually, you think it's just a Botox thing, but actually these people are, because I can imagine your LTV is pretty high. We don't need to talk about what it is, but I'm guessing it's pretty high because they need to keep coming back, right? Like it's like a subscription, right?
Yeah. And then the model had changed as well over the last kind of couple of years where, you know, it became not older people wanting to look young.
Yeah.
It became late millennials wanting to look better.
Oh, okay. So this isn't, so maybe I'm misunderstanding the demographic here. Like this isn't the 50, 60 plus category.
No. Our market is late millennials.
What's a late millennial? Like someone in their 30s?
Yeah.
Like someone like me?
Yeah, early 30s.
They're your main customers?
Early 30s to very early 40s, 20% men.
What? Did the VCs expect to hear that?
No, because when people hear Botox, they think, hey, I've seen a video where someone had an operation on Facebook once, and, you know, it's nothing like that. So that's why all our clinics are clean, they're silent, they're white, they're wood, they appeal to a certain demographic. And I think that's been the key to the market. You know, like if you were to look at things that really interest me, like Casper, you know, who knew they needed a new mattress? In reality, you know.
But what's interesting is I guess this formed part of your pitch, but it's like the demographic megatrend, or the megatrend, which is health, and these health things is a huge trend, and younger demographics are getting more involved. They have a higher percentage of their rate of spending maybe on health stuff rather than, say, alcohol in the past. And you're playing into those big long-term trends as well. Is that part of the attraction?
Health is, you know, we're testing today with health IVs. I'm going to get one after this. So I'll take an IV in my arm that we've designed. The products are bespoke to us. And these are things that can be for detox. There are things that can be for wellness. There are things that We can make these for weight loss. So we're on this cusp of something that's dramatically moving into a mega trend.
Wow. And Pat, do you see this as kind of a purely physical retail? Are you wrapping a digital kind of layer on this, you know, or how are you going to do that? Like, you know?
Mostly around acquisition. We've now launched video consultations. That's going really well for us. And I think it's this quick ability to change.
Yeah.
You know, it's this startup thing, you know, it's A/B testing constantly. That didn't work, throw it away. Okay, what's next? Let's run the other B against the other A. Let's see what comes out of that. But it's like consistent testing. It's been willing to get really young people in here and work with you and say, okay, what did you do when you were building gambling products for Paddy Power?
Yeah. Okay. And you feed that into your platform.
Exactly. It's a completely different. My team, which would be the marketing and customer acquisition team, have never worked in beauty before, ever. It would be nowhere near their skill sets, you know. But I'm reminded of one of my best friends, Mike Arrington, used to own TechCrunch, and I remember him interviewing. It's probably one of the best interviews I've seen. He was interviewing Nick Stenstrom, who built Skype, and Mike said, and crystal clear, Mike said, "I notice you don't have any telco executives on your team." And he said, well, they all told me it couldn't be done.
Yeah, all the telco people in industry said it wasn't gonna get done.
This doesn't work.
Yeah, this doesn't work. And therefore, yeah, you needed people outside of industry.
Yeah, but it's like when beauty people look at me and it's like marketing. Fill this, and they're going, yeah, but why don't you have beauticians? Because it doesn't work.
Yeah. And so you can just start from the ground up, first principle.
We can start from the ground up. We're going to build 20 clinics really quickly. They're already paid for. They were part of our last. And we want to surround them with very late millennial high-end brands. So, you know, I can see SISU next door to Lululemon.
Okay, so I'm going down whatever, you know, in New York, and I see a Lululemon, I see a SISU and a Starbucks or a Warby Parker side by side.
Warby Parker, Rumble Boxing, Soul Cycle, Trader Joe's, Whole Foods.
And so, say 3-5 years from now, is there a SISU in every major city, from Sydney to what do you see is possible in terms of how big you get?
In our construction partner contract, our construction partner wanted to put in 750 clinics, and we told them it wasn't ambitious enough.
That's just in the US, I'm assuming as well.
Just in the
before
US.
You even get into Asia or
we have off the wall inquiries from the Gulf. From the Gulf and Australia would be the two biggest inbound at the moment.
Very exciting. All right. Well, look, it's yeah. No one knew what you were doing, Pat, but I think people are going to start getting a sense for it now, you know. And
you know, it was funny because I started doing it, and all of a sudden I noticed all the tech guys who I've been friends with for years are kind of, you know, when they be muted, and you're thinking, oh my God. But I've missed them.
But I mean, you've done some big things, right? So you've got Cubic, Trustev. Is this going to be bigger than all of that? Is this going to be...
This is like heading towards double-digit millions turnover already.
Wow.
And that's just in Ireland, which is, you know, the population of Queens.
So great cash flows, great unit economics, great user, you know, LTVs, all that kind of stuff, and a global marketplace.
And I think more importantly, two great partners who are doctors. So, you know, they think about all the medicine.
Yeah.
I think about all the patients and how to attract them. A massive feedback loop. Like we're 2 years old. We're just 2 years old last month. I think there's 3,000 5-star reviews. Again, all done by tech.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like it's like having a beauty parlor.
Yeah.
And saying, okay, I'm going to hire 100 beauticians. How do I fill them? But I'm going to hire the 100 beauticians today.
Yeah. But I love that you were doing something like you were looking in on the unusual places where there was not a lot of competition, so much competition to build another photo sharing app or whatever. But you were over here, but all the VCs still, even then, you know, as high-minded as some of the global VCs are of talking about the non-obvious thing, they still didn't get it, right? Or at least a lot of them.
If you were to look at, like, I personally know, I have friends who were VCs who turned Peloton down.
Wow.
I have friends who were VCs who turned Whoop down.
Whoop,
I pleaded with a friend who's a VC, because I think I've been one of the earlier guys on most of the fitness stuff now. And I pleaded with a friend who was a VC to back Whoop, and he didn't. I think it raised 106 million last week, NBA alignments, PGA alignments.
Yeah, it's just, before it was just pure digital. Now the opportunities are, right, we were talking about ag tech, you know, like being kind of like a big, what's your, you know, that's a bit like, I mean, if AI in the wild, right?
If I was to look at two things to go, even though fitness and health are now starting to, you know, become a centralized trend, but like there's, you know, tonal is amazing. I don't know if anybody watching it knows a TONAL. Go look at it, it'll blow your mind. It's a gym for your house that's got a mirror.
Okay.
And everything is done by hydraulics, every single, it'll blow your mind.
Yeah, it's like tonal.
And the big trend, you know, the big trend coming is ag tech, and John Hartnett and Thrive is very early on that. And I thought he was crazy, to be honest. So, you know, we're going to have to change the way we farm because our populations are becoming more and more educated. They're not working the land. So that means that the land has to be automated. So there's incredible stuff happening in agriculture, you know, and we, you know, we're not at the front of it. It's actually, California is really hot on it. South America is starting to really click at it. I know we have amazing food companies in Carberry and Kerry and that kind of stuff, but I think this ag tech stuff is just...
It's only getting started.
I just need to find a good farmer.
That'll be, once you get Botox done, you'll be out to the fields after this. That'll be the next thing that Pat Phelan does. Look, I want to switch around a little bit, and then we're going to go to Q&A really soon, guys. But I want to just, there's a little bit of startup folklore that I wanted to ask straight out. Is it true that you helped the Collison brothers get their first check for Stripe? Is that true? Did that happen?
So I met Paddy and John when they were kids years and years ago. We used to go to, there used to be all these startup events years ago, blog meets, and I was stuck in those, and they were amazing, two amazing guys. And I was in San Francisco and they asked to meet me. And they said they needed, I won't say the figures now because it wouldn't be fair. So they said they needed X, you know, they wanted to raise X ASAP. And I was in Cubic at the time, and, you know, everything was in Cubic. It was fairly penniless. It was the first one where the opportunities were.
And they were just starting out at this stage.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, they were both in college. So my advice to both of them was, one was in Harvard, and one was in Stanford. Lads, you made a few quid now, finish off college. They told me they were building a bank and that they wanted to do a quick raise, and would I do it? And I said I didn't have it, but I knew someone who would. And I introduced them to the someone who did.
Wow. So you told the Collison lads to stay in school, yeah? Is that it?
Yeah, that's my, I don't know if you see it, I'm blushing.
Oh, sure. Look, you know, the anti-portfolio is one of those VCs.
Yeah, but that, you know, when they go public at above 100 billion, you know, that email will be framed in my office.
Yeah. Well, fair play to you for helping them out. And I know that you help a lot of founders, right?
I love that kind of stuff. It's the key to everything.
Yeah, I know you've helped them
give it away, you know.
But you also have that kind of view that, you know, you're not helping with you know, taking a slice of equity every time. Right? Like, what's your view on that?
I think the problem is, and I see it an awful lot in Irish companies, and, you know, I do investments, and I see it in Irish companies where the cap table is destroyed. Yeah. You know, Johnny's uncle owns 10% and the pizza boy got 2%. and someone once done a spreadsheet for them and got 3%, and all of a sudden, you know, two young fellas who started off own 39% of their own company, 61% of the cap table is external to the company. Yeah. And, you know, the VC looks at it, and the VC might give them a meeting. Yeah. And he might say, this looks really interesting. And if he's interested, the first thing he will say is, send me over the cap table. And if he sees you not owning enough of the cap table, he's just going to say, look, this is a mess, because what they're really backing at seed stage, and you've seen hundreds and dog pack, what they're really backing is people. Yeah. And, you know, because if I lose the 100 grand this time, look, this guy's going to learn so much, and the next one might be $1 billion. Yeah. So you're picking the person, you know, you're saying, I like this person. The idea, I think I can massively help them. I don't know. But the minute you see the cap table, you're going to go, look, this guy, these two guys, if I put in $1 million at 5 million, they're going to go from 39 to sub 30% of their own company. Now, and the VC is thinking, what are the board meetings going to be like? Yeah. Well, these two are going to have one seat. All these other guys who have now 50-something% will have control. I don't need that in my life. So I help. And I have two rules in companies that I help. I never charge and I never take stock.
Yeah, fair play, fair play. I mean, it's so true on this. I mean, fair play on that, because I know how many founders like that I know very quietly, by the way, that you've helped in so many, because I hear these, you know. But the other thing is around the cap table. I would say there was a guy came into me, and I put him onto a VC, and the VC called me up and said, I like him, I like the space. The cap table's screwed. We can't do it. And
there is something to fix there, Paddy. Yeah, they're very awkward conversations, because the people who, if the VC wants to come in, there's a great chance that the company has a better chance than it had. Yeah. And you have to go back to the 60%. Yeah. And you have to get them buy-in, and you have to do the vision and say, listen, there's a problem. It's valued at nothing today. Yeah. Yeah. Let's fix it now.
Let's fix it now. So you can always fix it, even if it has been a bit screwed up. Like
absolutely.
Yeah. So it's not like game over if you feel like you've made a mistake early stage, right?
Oh, but it's better not to make the mistake.
Yeah, it's better not to.
Because what happens is the guy who has 10% suddenly thinks that this thing is worth 5 million.
Yeah. Yeah.
My money is worth 500 grand, but it's worth nothing today. It's only happening if the money comes in. Yeah. And you kind of have to paint a picture and get them on a journey. And I've seen it work very well. Yeah. Yeah. But I've also seen hundreds and hundreds of losses where the VC just go, look,
yeah. I think it's something in our ecosystem in particular, like that we just need to get it out. You know, maybe
get it out and get rid of it. Anybody who's giving you advice, the cheapest thing you can give them is money.
Yeah. So Pat, what do you like when you chat to these early stage founders and you're helping them out in Ireland, right? And they're asking you for advice or whatever. I mean, is there different, like, do you see different things that early stage founders who are successful in the US are doing versus Irish founders? Is there any kind of, are they too quick to ask for money, or what would you say, or some of the things that you see that are bad habits, right?
I think there's probably the first bad thing is probably a lack of a relationship. Mm-hmm. The first ask doesn't need to be money. John Flynn, who is an investor of mine who's amazing at ACT. John was an investor of mine at Cubic. He was an investor in TransUnion. He didn't invest in SISU. But we've had numerous coffees and we've had numerous teas and catch-ups, and he's incredibly interesting, very bright. But if I was in Dublin tomorrow, I'd say, John, do you want to grab a coffee? Yeah. You've got to open the relationships, maintain them. It's not that, hey, Pat, meet Patrick. Hey, Patrick, I need money.
Yeah.
And there's a flow to that.
Yeah.
And it's like, grab a coffee, take them along on the idea, you know, do you know anybody could help me? Because we're always thinking that it's the person we're talking to can help us. And it's probably someone in their network, the high frequency trader who's back there who can help them, you know.
6 degrees, yeah.
Don't ask for money on the first meeting, and don't send an email asking for money, and don't send a VC. Don't send a VC a direct email, no matter how much you want to.
Yeah, I feel like you need to get out earlier so that you're not under this pressure where you're like, oh shit, I've only got like a month, so I have to ask for money. If you just got out earlier, even if it's kind of a messy idea, at least you can build a relationship. I suppose
the other thing on that, sorry to interrupt you, the other thing on that people make a huge mistake on, they try looking for one person to give them €1 million to solve everything in one go.
Yeah.
And $1 million is very easy to raise if you start breaking it down into bite-sized chunks.
Yeah.
It's 20/50s.
Yeah, 20/50s. Yeah.
Or easy, or 50/20s.
Yeah. And often if you get one person at 50 who's kind of known,
he'll bring you 4 or 5, and there's then this spider web effect. Exactly. And then what happens is, in the most famous words of Liam Casey, fear turns into greed. And then the train is leaving the station, and there's people then saying, hey, is there any chance I could get in there? But it's that key to get, you know, don't put this, you know, eat the elephant one bite at a time.
Yeah, exactly. All right, I think we're going to go to questions in a second. One final thing I wanted to ask you actually is you know, when you sold Trustev, and we started to scale Ireland, or we spun it out in Dogpatch, because I think we're one of the best policy environments in the world if you're Google, and one of the worst if you're an entrepreneur here in Ireland. You know, you know. And so, like, what's your view quickly on what needs to happen here? Do we have enough of the right policies to really get entrepreneurs thinking big in this country?
Well, I think number one, something I'm very proud of, you know, I'm 20 years sober, and I had a fairly messed up life before that. And Ireland was extraordinarily good to me. Yeah. So I pay all my taxes here. Everything. And that's not a big boast. Everybody else does as well.
Well, not everyone. I'm sure there's a few with you know.
I do, and I pay all my capital gains, and I'm very strict about that. And there's as you know, there's very easy ways to avoid capital gains.
Yeah.
And it's not the hardest thing in the world. But I'm a great believer in Ireland Inc. Sometimes it mightn't look like I do on Twitter, but I do. And I think, you know, I think the capital gains thing is messed, you know, because in Ireland I've got my first $1 million is at 10% tax, whereas in the UK it's the first 10 millions at 10
million. So the UK government's think 10 times bigger than an Irish entrepreneur.
Yeah. And if you look, I don't know, is it coming out today or Monday? Germany is just releasing a huge new plan on tax around options.
Options, I saw that, yeah.
So that. I think that will be bigger again. And I think what we have here is we probably have a huge problem, but it's probably saved us as well. So I feel kind of odd talking about it, where, you know, the FDI, which is the Googles and the Semantics and the Facebooks, they've created, you know, thousands of jobs, and they've created very good tax roll for Ireland because of the amount of people it's employee contribution tax rather than income tax.
Yeah. And
what's happened is, because there are those tens of thousands of FDI jobs, there's probably a lack of thought to the entrepreneurial roles. And what we have compared to, well, maybe you can answer your own question. Compared to when we were starting out on Wired, there certainly appears to be a lot less startups.
Yeah, and you get concerned like that COVID will kill off a lot, because early stage funding is down 50% or whatever. You know, how do we ensure that we don't undo 10 years of effort? You know.
Yeah, but, that's the problem. You know, and you know. And you have to look at a guy who's married with 1 kid, works for Facebook, makes 130K a year. It's going to be very difficult for him with the price of property, and he's got a mortgage, to even think about a startup. And then even if it's a medium result, to think about I'm going to have to give away 33% of this in tax on the stuff that I put my life on hold for.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I never Trustev and Cubic and all that. Like, I never paid myself a living wage.
No, neither did I really in Dogpatch either.
Yeah.
I really think it needs to change. And I really think, to be honest, you know, this all-in bet on FDI, you know, in terms of our economic,
needs to be balanced, you know.
Need to balance it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there is a little bit of a wake up because FDI is dropping, as you know.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, there's obviously going to be some startup news around communities and stuff coming out over the next few weeks. So I think there's been some dramatic changes, and hopefully that leads to further shake-ups. You know, Brian's been amazing.
Brian Caulfield.
On the Startup Ireland stuff, and, you know, and there's been a big gang around that. But I think, you know, the thought of tax regime changes at the moment is probably pushed down the road quite a bit, you know.
Look, I want to hit some questions from the gang here. So this is a question from Mim on research, right? She says, fascinating and very amusing. Thanks, Pat. You mentioned that it takes massive research to get the idea right, or to get the right idea. But how do you go from the point of doing the research to just taking that leap of faith and moving forward, like committing, like what that moment, is there anything you would share with Mim in terms of going from research to jumping in and committing a decade of your life to something, right?
I mean, if I do questions on Instagram, the number one question is, how do I start the startup? I mean, you have to start.
You just have to get on.
And it's like, you know, you've done the research, you think there's a market opening. If there's a market opening, you research the cost of being a player in the market. Then you've got to raise the money to be a player in the market. Then you've got to understand, okay, if I'm a player in this market, how am I different from what's there already? And how can I attract the people who are on the left over to my right?
Yeah.
And it's, you know, it's all, in reality, everything's about customer acquisition.
Yeah, customer acquisition.
You know, when people forget it, what does it cost me to win one customer? When that customer is with me, what's their LTV, lifetime value to me?
Yeah.
Is it profitable?
Yeah.
Can I employ people? And is it scalable? Because, you know, you want to build one donut shop, that's great as well.
Yeah. And somebody, I think Luke Teeling, I'd love to know Pat's thoughts on the mistakes that companies are making in terms of customer acquisition. So you talked about make sure you frame it the right way, right? What is the cost and what is the LTV? But actually going out and acquiring those customers, or is there mistakes, or is there anything you would say about like you finding customers generally?
I think people make dramatic mistakes on not measuring channels.
Okay.
They're looking at an overall marketing budget. Here's what a customer cost us last week, or yesterday, or the last hour. They don't look at, okay, we've got Facebook, we have a LinkedIn policy, we're doing TikTok, we're doing Instagram, Facebook, there's 100 of them. What's each channel costing us? And finding that channel and saying, okay, I've noticed that the customers on Facebook cost me 1/5 of anywhere else. And I've tracked them to their spend, and their spend is 20% more. And, you know, like Jack Dorsey, he always says that Twitter is such a success because of what they took out, not what they put in. And they've, you know, I think it was on Twitter 16 years or something last week, some anniversary thing came up, and it's the exact same, except it works.
Yeah.
Because it used 12 or 14 years ago, it was dropping over every hour.
Yeah.
And that's the thing.
That's the thing.
You have to find your best acquisition channel. What works? Is it the best type of customer as well for you? Mm-hmm. And after that, like that's where I'm looking at the moment, you know.
So you line up all your potential channels, maybe do a few little tests in all of them, understand what's working, right? And then you start to focus in on a few that really work and you say, that's what I'm going to do. Yeah?
And I think the other part that people miss is creating client personas. What does my customer look like?
Persona, yeah. Do you do that in SISU now? You really think about that persona?
Yeah.
You know, you're 35-year-old male, you're 35-year-old female, you're 60-year-old man. And,
yeah. And it's how you talk to people. You know, you can't talk to a 21-year-old person who wants lip enhancements. You can't talk to a person who wants Botox and lips in the same voice, because it's a totally different market.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, let me pick out another couple of questions. How early is too early to start talking to VCs? Like, so is there a point where it's just not a good idea because you're so early? Or is it, you know, is it better to be like, look, this is who I am and I'm working on this idea, and they get to know the person rather than the idea first, right? Like, what would you kind of say in terms of like going to a frontline or a wherever, and you're in this ecosystem? Should you hold off for a while you get your pitch together, if you like, or
well, it's nice to take someone for a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they're great. I mean, I don't know how many hundreds of hours Will in Frontline has given me over his career, even before Frontline. You know, very decent person. And, you know, numerous cups of coffees and talking to him about stuff.
Yeah.
And I think if you're, you know, I think as well, people get confused between partners and associates.
Yeah.
And, you know, you go for a cup of coffee with an associate and you start building a relationship with a firm through the associate, if you don't know them already, or a junior. And I wouldn't be engaging at a partner level until you've got maybe a product and a thing and a couple of test customers maybe.
Yeah.
Because, you know, they're going to want to sign up, play with it.
Yeah.
Especially if they don't know you.
Yeah.
So, you know, like it's building, like that's where things like Web Summit and, you know, perfect for this type of thing, you know. And I think as well, it's also identify venture capitalists who are active in your vertical.
Yeah.
Don't go talking to a guy in ag tech about ad tech.
I don't know. Yeah, well, I think that's a good point though, which is one rule of thumb is don't talk to a VC until you talk to a customer.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
You know what I mean? I see that a lot. You know, you're like, have you talked to any of these people? Have you even attempted to have a conversation? You know,
the hardest part is the first sale.
Yeah.
You know, I remember back in Trustev days, we were going broke. This will tell you. And we were down in, where were we? Miami. Kieran Sexton's cousin was the manager of the Fontainebleau. We hadn't a shekel. We were in trouble. And she gave us a suite in the Fontainebleau. I think we put it up on Twitter. We were there to meet Telefonica. The conversation didn't go well. Liam Casey rang me and he said, Radio Shack, who were a huge American company at the time, would like to meet you. I was talking to their CEO. We ran to the airport, flew to Dallas and closed a 1.2 million deal as a customer. And wow. We had to build stuff for it and they agreed to give us half in advance, and that saved the company.
So one of your customers ended up throwing in the cash.
And people forget that, you know, if I was talking to a business the other day who were, you know, just about to do a test with a large company, and the test is the investment.
Yeah, the test is the investment. Yeah. Well, if you're that valuable, they want you to survive, right?
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. All right, just a question here from Jackie, and then we're going to start to have to wrap up. Just on the topic of getting closer to your customer. So if your customers are mostly female, I don't know if they are, but this is the question.
80-20.
80-20 female to male. Okay. So as a consequence of that, how do you think about building a team then? You know, do you think about, you know, having a female or, you know, that's the question there from Jackie.
I think about skills.
Yeah. Okay.
More than sex. I'd say if we were to look at people, we'd be probably 50-50, I'd say, maybe a bit more.
50 in the
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think it's more about skills than sex.
Okay, fair enough. All right, we just have a time for a one or two more. So you raised from Greycroft. Do you think if you're seriously looking for funding, you need to be willing to hit all the VCs in the USA from the start? Or, you know, is it like, should you leave Ireland immediately and get on a plane and just forget about everything in Europe or Ireland? What's your view?
I think, again, this is where people probably make a mistake, and I've made it, is that there's no such thing as hitting all the VCs. You need to get, if you're going to talk to a venture partner, let's say you want to talk to Greycroft.
Yeah.
Well, what you would probably do, if I was giving you a good tip, is have a brilliant idea, have a customer, be ready for some sort of scaling attributes, and cozy up to someone like me, who Greycroft have invested in, and ask for a warrant, you know, ask for, like, they have their associates, but everyone that's been, like, if you want to talk to ACT, Greycroft, Bullpen, etc., Qualcomm Ventures, you know, cozy up to me, because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for their network to recommend people to come into their network.
Yeah.
We're the ambassador, like, we're the ambassadors.
The alumni, the portfolio, they're a great way of getting to a VC rather than trying to go in the front door.
Well, going in the front door doesn't work unless you know, unless you're Mark Zuckerberg or something.
So I see it, a few different people are asking, and I don't know, because I know you're so busy, but like, if someone did want to get advice, or maybe, you know, get some advice from you, what would be the best way to do that? Or
I'm all over the place. I'm not hard to find.
And I know you're going to be doing some more mentoring in Dogpatch, hopefully, in the new year as well. So we might
so talk to you. Don't talk to me. Talk to you.
That just became my problem. Okay, all right. So look, Pat, listen, I think we've kind of run out of time, but we did cover a good bit of, I mean, there's so much to talk about in your career.
Yeah.
We didn't even talk about Cubic and everything you're doing there. And I know you're doing some health apps on the side, but it's been great to have you.
Great to see you, Paddy.
It's really been
thanks very much to all the team. They've been extraordinarily patient with me over the last few days.
Not at
especially
all.
Mena.
Yeah, and fair play to you, Pat, for getting the largest attendees ever in the history of Dogpatch. Trust the master of momentum and hype to.
We're in the middle of a COVID and people are locked in their houses. You know what I mean? It's not that hard.
Well, look, Pat, we you know, I mean, if there's any kind of parting advice that you like, so again, to the early stage, is there anything you'd kind of finish by saying to the folks that are just at the start of their journeys now, as someone who's kind of been through it a few times? I know I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but anything that comes to your head generally before we wrap?
If you're on your own, find someone. Two will always work better than one. They will want to see two. Protect your stock. Like your life depends upon it.
Yeah.
Start looking for a customer or a client very early.
Customer early. Yeah.
So kind of a beta tester, and you know, think about scale much earlier.
Yeah.
And you know, I say, you know, I remember meeting someone and he telling me, you know, where I said to him, he said, we're in Dublin now. And I said, where are you launching next? We're thinking about Galway. You know, and you're thinking, you know, you're thinking about Galway and I'm thinking about Dubai.
You're thinking about, Dubai. But that's the one thing for, you're always thinking about 5 to 10 times bigger than most people I meet on a day-to-day basis, Pat. And I think that's something that everyone could just think bigger, right?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and you know, there's, you know, and I know this startup world, it's a bit influencer, you know, it's a bit famey. You know, try pull away from that, and you know, it's not all about who's in the Sunday Business Post or who's anywhere.
Work ethic.
If you have something amazing, they will find you.
Okay, Great. Well, listen, Pat, thank you so much. Thank you for everyone who tuned in. We have a link there if you want to give us some feedback on how today was. We have our next First Fridays on the 4th of December, the last one of the year. So sign up to our newsletter, which is also in the link as well. Thank you to my own team, to Miriam, to Jake, to the extended crew, everyone who puts this together. I think that was our biggest First Fridays ever. We had folks from all across Ireland and internationally tune into this, most exciting. And so hopefully the next one can be even bigger. And finally, thank again to you, Pat. I know how busy you are, right? And I know you've probably got about a 10-hour day ahead of you still, right, as the US wakes up. Yeah. But thank you so much. And we'll be tuning in. And good luck with the next race.
Thanks, Paddy, and thanks everyone at Dog Patch. Bye.
Thanks.